And then big picture, a philosophy that guides me, that always helps me, is victory to the vulnerable. Because it allows me to lean into vulnerable experience. And when I mean vulnerable experience, I don't mean you're in physical danger or anything like that. I'm talking about it's just it's vulnerable emotionally. It's uncomfortable. Maybe you have to have a conversation that you know is difficult and hard. Maybe you have to listen instead of speaking. Whatever vulnerable is to you, that philosophy guides me to continue to be present.
Welcome to the Elev8 podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you have found the right episode. I am pumped to bring you my guest this round. He's one of the world's leading mental performance coaches. He has worked with some of the best athletes in the NBA, including Aaron Gordon, Ben Simmons, Karl Anthony Towns, and Andrew Wiggins, to name a few, as well as organizations like the Utah Jazz and San Antonio Spurs. My man is also the author of the book Play Present. His mission is to bring mental training to the masses. He has also helped create the app Lucid. Check it out. I'll link it up and download it and give it a try. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, my man, Graham the Guide. How are you this morning?
Man, I'm great. Grateful to be here and, just getting my coffee going. So, man, I'm excited.
Good. I know it's a little bit earlier out west for you today. I want to get started before we got going. My man Graham sent me some remixes. I wanted him to share a little bit about it and where that came from, but it got me fired up, got me even more excited to get on this call with you and to chat a little bit and allow you to share some of your wisdom and insights. But what was that remix all about, man?
Yeah. Well, listen, I love music. And, with mental training, over the years, it's always grown on me that if I leave people with music after I speak, now they have something they can listen to kind of get the messages. And so it's just a way to help train. I mean, I love beats. I love music. I work with some cool producers. And all I'm doing is coaching. And they just put music behind me. So kind of figured out it's a way that a lot of athletes like to train. You know, when you're lifting weights or you're working out and you just have music on in the background, now you can have messages in there. You know, you can be getting subconscious messages delivered. And say you listen to the song 30, 40, 50 times, man, this stuff's going to start to stick a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so just having fun with music and having fun training with it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I already had the thought. I'm like, I got to put this in my playlist. Hopefully we can link that up to this podcast so some people can find it, because I think it's I'm sure people will dig it. So your book Play Present, that's been out, why is playing present the place we should want to play?
Man, I got introduced to this concept when I was 19 years old. I was just super going through a rough time in my life, my first year of college. And I remember my first counselor to help me with anxiety and depression. She just mentioned the word being present. And she was like, it's a skill and you have to practice. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't even know it was a thing. You know, I just was going through life, having a tough time. And then once she described it like a skill, everything started to make sense to me that, oh, okay, I got to practice it. Maybe it's not easy. You're not going to have perfect days at this. And so that planted the seed that being present required, energy, attention, motivation, practice. And so as I walked back on to play college basketball after I got some good, therapy, as I was playing, I was like, man, this present thing like helps. I realized I had an advantage. I wasn't like a great basketball player, but I was like, there's an advantage out here. And then so as I got into doing work with high school kids in the early 2000s, all I was thinking about was creating language, because to me, mental training is a language.
Yeah.
It's pointing people in a direction with the subtleties of language. And it just came to me one night, just play present. It was like these words just downloaded into my brain. And then they would just like, it'd be obsessive in my head. I don't know if you ever had this experience where like these words would just bother me all the time. I'd be like, it's not leaving me. It's not leaving me. And then I would tell it to kids and they'd be like, makes sense. And I'd be like, okay. And then it started to dawn on me that okay, if I can make this into a playbook. So once again, I wanted to make it easy. And so I thought, I love playbooks, right? You just memorize the plays and then you run the plays. And then it's, so I wrote Play Present as a playbook. It's a series of plays. My goal was to keep it under 50 pages. And then I worked with a really good artist who tried to draw everything I was talking about. And so I'm a visual learner. I hate just getting in these books with tons of words and I just get lost in it sometimes. So that's how Play Present came to me. And the catalyst that really drove it home, I started working with this basketball player named Aaron Gordon when he was a kid. And it became very apparent that by the time he was like 16 or 17, this guy's going to go to the NBA. And I remember thinking to myself, man, this is really real. Everything I'm saying to him is real and he's listening. So that also is kind of what made Play Present come to be, was like, hey, this has to be organized for this 16-year-old and it's got to make sense to him. So that was kind of the drive. Because once I knew he was going to go to the NBA, I was like, oh man, like I can't just say random words to this kid. I have to let me just put this in a package. And so that's how it kind of came together,
I think language is important, right? Not just what we say to ourselves, but how we coach. You talked a little bit about your past there, but what kind of really led or pushed you into kind of the career of this mental training, and what do you enjoy most about helping athletes and people hone those mental skills?
Man, well, it's first of all, just from my own experience, doing some work on myself in mental health just profoundly changed my life. And, there was a stigma against mental health and, you're soft if you do it or something's wrong with you. And this is 1997. I'm 19 years old and I'm just really struggling in life. And I reached out to my mom and she knew a counselor. And I just remember thinking, thank God there's something. Because what I didn't want to hear was, hey, well, you're screwed, hey, that's how it goes. But what I heard was, hey, you can do something about it if you want to put effort in. And she said words to me I won't forget. She said, you can rewire your brain. And I didn't know what that meant, but what I heard was hope that, okay, if I put effort in, whatever I'm about to go start doing, they say it helps. And so I got introduced to a counselor from San Francisco. She was just amazing. And it's my first year of college. It's, she's teaching me to meditate and to visualize and all this stuff. And that was kind of where the spark set off. And it wasn't for a little while later that sports became a part of it. But it just helped my life so profoundly, learning this stuff. And my experience, once you learn it, you just want to share it,
For sure. They used to joke about, like, how do you know if someone's vegetarian? They'll tell you.
That's right.
Right. And I was like, I always kind of felt that, like, once I started meditating, it was like, if someone said meditation, I'm like, I'll tell you, I'll talk. Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
That's right.
So sorry to bring out some bad jokes, but I always felt kind of like, when it came to meditation, I'm like, what are you talking about? And I think
one thing to add, it was always interesting to me. Clearly, when you start being aware of the food you eat, it profoundly impacts your body. And you're like, this isn't even like a joke. It feels good. I feel better. I function better. So when I would get into, this meditation stuff and people would think it was like soft and I would be like, man, like they just have no idea. Yeah. And then I was able to come into sports and I would be like, this gives you a major advantage from being here in sports. So I also knew a big part of what I would always try to do was take these kind of maybe like softer concepts, and then try my best to bring it into a competitive space with a little bit of firepower. So, we might say, meditation is really badass. It's actually for those willing to be, strong and courageous and vulnerable. And that's way more tougher than not being vulnerable, and.
Yeah. That's, I always loved, I forget where it came from. I don't know if it was a Dan Harris thing, but it's like curls for the brain.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
that, so think of it. We've had a great opportunity. You mentioned Aaron. I know you've worked with a lot of other great athletes, organizations, coaches. Is there a lesson along that journey as you were teaching that you were able to learn from one of those people?
Man, it's, I feel like they were just as much, if not more, teachers for me on my journey than me being teachers for them. So it's always a collaborative experience. It's always a two-way thing going on. How much was taught to me it's so profound. For like, I never thought I was going to write a book. Like, I didn't want to write a book. I just remember working with Aaron Gordon as a young kid. I was like, man, I'm kind of required to do this. So what I learned was to be responsible for what I was given, and to be responsible for like the opportunities. And I think a really, really big lesson they taught me was how to create space for people that maybe have a lot of attention on them. And so a big thing of what I do, I remember as I had to learn to not let anything be about myself. And that was really hard, right? Because we're all humans, we're going through life, and I'm here coaching someone, and I have to be able to create space for them and not make it about me. And so what they taught me was how to not make things about myself, and how to help the person I'm going through. So I might be feeling fear, going through stuff with my family at home. You know, I'm married, I have kids. I mean, those are like heavy responsibilities. And I'm here coaching like a 19-year-old. He's telling me what's going on in his life. And I'm like, I have this profound stuff going on in my life back home, but I have to be able to create space for this kid and not just dump on him with my stuff. So they really helped me there's too many lessons to talk about, but I'd say like the major one is the personal responsibility that I had to really own, to be around. And that's hard, man,
Yeah. I think that I can relate to that. One of the other cool things you've done, I wanted you to share a little bit about is the Lucid app.
All right.
We talked about, getting some of those good vibes to music. I really love how you've kind of taken mental skills and moved it into an accessible tech ways in your career. So it's really neat. Talk a little bit about Lucid and how it can help people, and we'll link that up here, and people please check it out.
Man, we just, after I wrote Play Present, I remember getting a call one day, and I had no money. I'm broke, my wife is pregnant, and you're in the middle of your journey going, man, how is this all going to happen? And I get a phone call hey, this guy wants to have lunch with you. He's a tech guy from San Francisco. And, you just don't think much of it. But as we sit down, it's a guy named Jason Sturman, and he's forming an app called Lucid. And we're sitting there in the meeting, and I remember this moment really vividly. And he goes, and if I ever meet someone who has content and a voice, man, that's all I need. And I was sitting there going, shit, that's all I have. Is I have this book I just wrote with super clean, crisp content, and I have an ability to coach. And we sat there and looked at each other, and we were like, man, this is it. And so he offered me a job, right? They offered to buy Play Present, the book. I got a salary. And for me, that had never happened in my life. And I was like, my God, it was kind of like my first really big breakthrough. And this was 2016. And then so we set out and built an app. And we basically took everything I wrote in Play Present, and we were like, okay, verbalize it, like say it out loud and make it into meditations and visualizations. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to reach kids where they were. We know everyone's on their phones, on their apps. So we put up hundreds of what I call MVPs, which are meditations, visualizations with powerful self-talk. And we tried to make them into little 5-minute little things, right? So just a bite-sized appetite to pick it up. And we got to collaborate with George Mumford. He's another great coach. He coached,
Legend.
Of course, Michael Jordan. And so I got to be around him a little bit. I was mostly just in awe around him, just listening as he would tell stories. And, but we built this app, and it was like a 1.5-year experience. We had some funding. The funding ran out. And as soon as it was done, I was like, wow, it really dawned on me that we have something here, that, recording, putting your voice on recordings, making it get out in easy, accessible ways. It just started to really dawn on me that mental training products, we've got to find easy ways to meet people. And then the last thing we did with Lucid before all our money ran out is we said, hey, let's make an album. And then the very last thing we did is we made a music album in 2017. I'll send that to you. And that's kind of where we started thinking about music as well. And music only came up too because I had done so many recordings to make an app that I just got comfortable on a microphone. Yeah. And so I was like, hey, it just kind of transitioned to let's put some beats behind it. So, but Lucid was the intro to the tech world. It was a cool experience, a really cool experience.
Yeah, I've checked it out. It's definitely worth it, athletes. So coaches out there, have your kids check it out as well. Is there a mental tool or topic lately that's got a grip or got you fascinated right now that can't stop thinking about?
You know, I, what comes to me right now is we're clearly in a wild year. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the craziest year of all time for every single human I've met. You know, they're like, no matter what position you're in, how much money you have, what's going on, everyone's going through it, you know? And so what I've found right now, this might sound, I don't know how to phrase it, but the tool right now is awareness. That what I sense right now is people are aware. And whether you like it or not, there's kind of a forced consciousness going on, a forced awakening where you go, man, all the things that made me feel comfortable, they just don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you go in, right, the work has to go in. And so what I see now, the tool that's here is an opening. I see a door open for a lot of people. And I'd say the first 15 years of my work, I was yelling really loud, like, hey, like this stuff matters. Like, do the work. You know, I was trying to like trick people, do all these things to help them come to it. And, you know, now I feel like everyone's just right there on the doorstep going, hey, how do we do this work? So I find with all that awareness and opening, now the tool that I see here is how can we simply give this to people in a way that makes it easy for them to start doing their work, to start their practice. Because I'm just one person. I have one way of doing it. And there's billions of human beings and we all need to work with people, you know? So I just find I want to make sure that people have access to this stuff now. I want to make people sure they have support, because here's the other thing, man, when I first started doing it, it's not a quick fix. This isn't like you just go do it for a couple hours and you go, oh, right on. Like I never have to think about mental health or going in again. This is like learning to work out. Once you realize exercise is a good thing for your life, you kind of do it, you know, every day, maybe a little bit, you know? So that's how mental training is. So the opening is here now. And I just want to make sure people have access. And so I think support is a big tool, you know, like once you know, hey, they're doing it, all these people doing it. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. I got support. Now we're going to build some momentum, hopefully in this space, you know,
Right on.
More momentum. There's been a lot of momentum built, but just continue to build, you know.
Love it. Where do you seek inspiration, especially in a crazy year like this?
Oh, man. You know, I've always considered myself a servant, you know, that I'm here to serve, I'm here to give. And when I first got introduced to this at 19, overwhelmingly inside of me, it was like, you have to share this. You have to share this. And it just became so palpable inside of me. So the inspiration is always there for me, right? Which is to give and serve and to help people. I have to keep it alive and fresh by continuing to reinvent how I do it. You know, for a while it was like working the NBA, you know, or whatever it was. And then you do that. And I was in the NBA working with the Jazz for a couple years. And my daughter one day was like, I miss you. And I was like, there's no comparison. Like I'm coming home because, you know, so it's not like I was 22 in the NBA. By the time I got there, it was like, well, I have kids and it's like a whole different world. So the inspiration to me is always continuing to serve, growth, meaning, and purpose. And that evolves in my life. But growth, meaning, and purpose are always what I'm looking for. And if I can read what's going on inside myself, you can usually hear, right? It'll tell you what to do.
Yep.
There's 100 voices that tell you what not to do inside of you. And what I've trained myself to do is just keep listening to that voice that knows. And so my inspiration comes from my connection. I'll call it to source. It's a connection to source, right? Whatever present into my head, whatever tells me to do all this stuff, what I do is I set the table for it and I listen to it. So I listen and serve, and then it just snowballs through me. So what I want to tell everyone is I feel like everyone has this. What I did was I just was like, F it. I'm just going to go do it. I'm going to go do what it says because I wanted to see if it was real. And as I kept doing it, man, shit would show up in my life that seemed like magic, right? Yeah. It seemed like magic. But then after I kept doing it, I was like, if things keep showing up and I keep serving deeper purpose, maybe that's not magic. Maybe that's just how this works. This is the mechanics of life. And so I've got it to where doing it for, you know, almost a few decades now, man, the inspiration for me is seeing what shows up, knowing if I keep just doing the work, staying devoted, committed, all these like things show up that are beyond what I can kind of imagine. So that's kind of a long answer, but man, follow your love basically is what I'm saying. Like follow that thing inside of you. And if you stick with it, I've had to go through every hell manageable. Like, you don't avoid all that. You go through your shit. That's how you transform. But then you realize you're okay. And you're like, that felt like death, but I'm alive.
Yeah.
And all these things I think I needed, I lost. And you're like, anyway, so it's a spiritual journey. And on that journey, you hang in there.
Yeah. What, if there was a athlete or coach listening, you wanted to share one quick tool that they could try after they hear this podcast to maybe help their day or help their mood or feel something, what would you want to share?
Well, immediately, one of the cool things about doing an MVP is it immediately makes you feel better. So, like, the cool thing about, like, meditation and, like, the music I just sent you, this isn't like, it's good for your future. And one day I'm like, man, just play it. And 5 minutes later, it's going to put you into a different dimension. And so you can do that right now. I would listen to music. I would check out Lucid or check out any place. You just go get a guided meditation. That's a tool you can do right now. And it's a practice I do all the time. It's how I got started in this. It's something to go to. So it's a go-to thing to do. And you sit there, breathe, right? You learn to kind of relax yourself. You learn to visualize. You learn to work on the power of your own voice. And it's fabulous. So that's something you can do right now. And then big picture, a philosophy that guides me, that always helps me, is victory to the vulnerable. Because it allows me to lean into vulnerable experience. And when I mean vulnerable experience, I don't mean you're in physical danger or anything like that. I'm talking about it's vulnerable emotionally. It's uncomfortable. Maybe you have to have a conversation that is difficult and hard. Maybe you have to listen instead of speaking. Whatever vulnerable is to you, that philosophy guides me to continue to be present in these, like, say, this year. How vulnerable is this year? People don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Every person I know has lost so much, from humans to all kinds of stuff. So I constantly lean into, hey, victory goes to the vulnerable. Let me show up. And then if I need to get centered in the moment, I'm like, it's too much. Maybe there's too much here. I do my MVP. And then I'll exercise. So let's keep it real. Getting into your body and exercising is. I remember with the Jazz one time. This is a great story to help. This is probably how most coaches are. It's a morning time. We're in a hotel. I'm talking with Quinn Snyder, the head strength coach, and the head sports scientist. Amazing humans, great people. They care about mindset. They're just fabulous. They're all drinking coffee, and I'm walking up, and you can see the tension, and not an angry tension, but you can just see, like, oh shit. And I'm like, look at these guys. And I walk up, they're just jacked. You're like, and they're moving fast, super quick. And I go, hey. And they want to roll. Okay, Grant, let's do mental health stuff. And I was like, pause. Have you eaten breakfast? They were like, no. I was like, okay, full stop. I said, did you sleep last night? They were like, barely. We're so pumped. I was okay. That's a second strike. And I go, have you exercised? You know what I mean? Have you worked out? They were like, no, we're too into what we're doing. And I was like, 0 for 3 right there. Like, there's no way we're talking about mental health and you don't work out, eat, and sleep. No way. Like, that's the foundation for everything. So I said, here's what we're doing today. Go eat a meal. No joke. I was like, go eat a meal and go lift some weights, and then we'll get back to business. And then they did it. And then all their energy just kind of centers, right? And then you're like, man, Quinn Snyder, the head coach, he's a genius. Now all of a sudden he can get across all of his geniusness, right? So that energy that when we're too heightened or too anxious, you've got to bring that in, and you just go to your basics. Just go work out. Probably haven't eaten for a while, and you need a nap. The funny thing is, it's just like taking care of a 5-year-old. So it's the same thing.
I love that you bring up, like, when you do mindset, and there's this, you see mindfulness and all kinds of these things, showing up everywhere. I literally heard a Coca-Cola ad talking about mindfulness, and Coke being your mindful moment. I'm like, wow, we're pushing the marketing envelope with the verbiage. But I love that you talked about the basics of it, because I think even when I started to meditate years ago, there's a process you learn. It's all about bringing it back, right? And I also, through tracking that, I found I was tracking my exercise and that was really, man, if I wasn't doing those basics,
Yeah.
I can meditate all day, but I'm still going to feel like a tired, groggy
There you go.
person that can't serve others. So
Come on.
it was,
That
I love that you
lesson is
talked
huge.
about it. Yeah. And so I think just tracking something, one of the things I found was like, oh, if I don't meditate, I was way less likely to ever work out. And I think for me, it was, if I won't give my mind 5 to 10 minutes in the day, I'm not going to give my body an hour later.
Right.
You know, it's just
Right.
kind of building that up. And love how you talked about that. If you could get into a time machine, the old Marty McFly, and go back and see 16-year-old Graham,
Ooh.
what's the one piece of advice, or what would you want to remind yourself that you've learned along your journey?
First of all, I love that question. It's a question I phrase in different ways with people, right? Because it's such a powerful question.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways you can listen to it. When I go back to being 16, man, I was anxious. And I remember being, you know, everything was your grade point average, SATs, where are you going to college? It was just this overwhelming pressure of the future. I grew up in San Francisco, and I went to a high school called Lowell High School. It was a public high school, but it was an academic powerhouse. So it was overwhelming pressure on results and outcomes. It was one of those like prestigious schools. Everyone's getting into like Georgetown and all that. And I wasn't going to work in that math world. And by math, I'm talking SATs, GPA, right? These things, you're just like, they're like forcing you into this anxious future. I would have told myself to relax and everything is okay. And I would have told myself to come, I would have introduced the present, right? I would have said, hey man, like you're right here. I would have taught myself to breathe a little bit. And then remember that this is what I do, not who I am. And I would have kind of separated myself from these results and outcomes a little bit earlier, and that anxiety. Fast forwarding, I've seen that cause a lot of harm for kids as you go into life, you know? So the stress was overwhelming. It was routine to see kids crying in the hallways, you know, before tests or all that stuff, thinking if they weren't perfect, life was over. And so I just would have eased that for myself because I felt that overwhelming. And then that bled over to basketball and all the stuff I was doing. I think I put on a good smile, you know, like I had a good front going, but deep down there was, you know, I was anxious. So I would have helped myself with that for sure.